Hi folks, Lance from Runtime Recruitment. Hope you're having a great time wherever you are. So this talk is really going to be about how do we attract the right kind of engineers and professionals into companies. So recruiting is the lifeblood of every company. Getting it right makes the difference between being great or just plain average. What do I mean by that? Everybody wants to attract the best talent out there, but there's only a limited supply of that talent. So how do you actually communicate your brand and the opportunity successfully to the candidate pool so you can attract those key champion players that are going to boost your bottom line by their efforts that they bring in to your company? That's what we're going to talk about today. So who am I and why should you care? So my name is Lance Harvey and I hold a degree in microelectronics and information processing. Now, I've been in different roles in life and in business. So I've been at the coalface as an engineer, and I've been a recruiter hands-on. I'm still a recruiter hands-on, but I've also run companies as well, small and large. So that's kind of my pedigree. So let's define the problem quickly. So what is the problem? What are the key blockers? So what I've done here is I've listed some of the problems that hiring managers face when they're trying to hire people quickly. A lack of good candidate flow. What do I mean by that? Just not enough good candidates coming in. Because there's a lot of candidates coming in perhaps or applying, but not enough of them are good enough for you to be able to interview them for your role. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. A slow recruitment process. The process is too long, too many people in the process, too much communication breakdown perhaps, and this is the second point, communication breakdown between the people involved in the recruitment process. We're going to talk a little bit about that too. A lack of ownership and urgency. That's because you haven't been able to communicate or people are not understanding what the sense of urgency is in the workflow, people involved in the workflow. A lack of recruitment experience. Typically, if you're a project manager, a CTO, CEO, you're not going to be doing recruiting all the time. It's not your core competency. So that lack of experience can also get in the way. And then there's the notion of cost. Especially for small to medium-sized companies, they don't want to spend money in recruiting people, certainly through an agency. That's something we're going to talk about as well. Avoid this experience. So somebody posted this on LinkedIn, and I'll just share this quickly with you. This chap has been trying to use all sorts of methods to try to attract people for his job. He's used agencies, he's used job boards, but he's not getting the kind of candidates that he wants. This is to do with the candidate flow. And he mentions here that he's getting lots of CVs, but they're coming from people that are not able to even write one line of code. And so he's blaming the Russian hackers for this, obviously. And my response to that is perhaps you're using the wrong suppliers, you haven't vetted the suppliers properly. And his response is that most recruiters are not technical. They don't understand the job spec and they don't know how to communicate that to the candidate pool. This is typical, unfortunately, of the recruitment suppliers out there. So let's talk about the options available to hiring managers. So the stakeholders, people like the PMs, the program managers, the project managers, and the CEOs, CTOs, etc. The ones who have the pain, startup founders, etc. They want to hire people quickly. What options do they have? They have an internal recruiter or recruitment team if they're big enough. They have an HR department, again, if they're big enough, they can afford an HR full-time. They might get an HR part-time as well, an agency, or they can do it themselves if they want to, if they have the time to do it. And there's different success levels for all these different options. If you use an internal recruiter and you've vetted them properly, you've hired them properly, and you've got a good relationship with them, you're going to get a good result. They're going to know about you, they're going to know about your projects, they're going to be vested in your actual problem, and there's going to be a sense of urgency that goes with that. So they can communicate that to the candidate pool and give you candidates. So that's a good option for you. So use HR with caution. HR's job is not to do recruiting. They are not trained to be recruiters. Their job is to do HR-related duties and tasks. What they can do for you is vet external suppliers. So get them to vet your external suppliers and stay in the loop and have that one-to-one point connection with yourself and the recruiter. Agency, again, make sure you vet your agency properly. I'm going to go through that later on. Your success and failure is going to be dependent on who you actually select as your supplier. So how to define the scope of your job requirement? Very, very important. Let's talk about that. Getting the job spec right first. Very important. If you don't get this bit right, nothing will work properly for you. So list the 3 most important skills and experiences. Why only 3, you ask? Well, if you think deeply about your problem, you will find that, particularly in a technical situation, you will find that you only need to define the 3 most important skills that you cannot do without, skills and experience. If you make those at the core of your job spec and have all the other things around that as nice to haves, that will give you much more focus. Less is more. Think of less is more always, and think deeply about the problem that you need to be solved by having someone come on board to your company. Now, outline your company culture, including team size, function, and structure. What do I mean by that? Well, every company has a culture. Every company has a set of teams, and they have their own structure as well. You know, it might be a flat management structure, it might be a hierarchy, whatever it is, you need to be able to communicate that in a document or by word to your recruiter so that they have an understanding about your culture they can communicate to the candidates that they're looking at and speaking to. That can also get them excited about your company and give them some sort of an idea of how to pitch the future growth and roadmap of the company to potential candidates. Be clear about your budget, your salary budget, which includes all upsides in the way of benefits. What do I mean by that? Well, what I mean by that is, it could be shares, it could be bonuses, it could be whatever it could be. You need to be able to list that. The reason for doing that is you may not want to release that to candidates at the initial outset, but when you want to close them, if they're a suitable candidate, you want to be able to pull these out of your hat as an ace card to be able to close them if they're going for other kinds of offers as well. So always be wary about what's in it for the candidate. Think about it from that point of view. Always be thinking about it, what's in it for the candidate. Not what's in it for you, because a lot of companies think about hiring from, well, what's in it for me? You've got to think about what's in it for the candidate, because if you do that, you're going to be coming across to them as someone that really cares about and wants to bring them on board, not just for your benefit, but for mutual benefit. And that's a psychological switch that is important to convey to candidates, because this day and age, particularly if they're a good candidate, they're going to have multiple choices. Communicate the roadmap for the new recruit. What do I mean by that is I'm talking about their career development, where they're going to go in their career, where's their career heading. Are they just going to be stuck in a corner, in a cubby hole, and that's all they're going to do forever and ever? No, they want to grow, they want to develop, they want to learn. So you need to be able to communicate that in a document or verbally to your recruiter so they can convey that to candidates, because they're going to be asking those questions. They're going to be asking, well, if I join your company over someone else, what are you going to offer me that they can't offer me? So that's important that you communicate that. Write a mindset document. What do I mean by that? What I mean by that is identify the behaviors of this individual. Every company has a culture. What kind of mindset are you looking for? Are you looking for proactive thinking, resourcefulness, thinking outside the box? I guess everybody wants those skills, but some companies may not want those kind of skills. They might want some other kind of skills. So you need to be able to define the kind of scope of the mindset of the individual that you're trying to hire. Because sometimes companies want to hire a real technical person, but that technical person may not be a very good team player. So they want to hire both. They want a team player and a technical person. So sometimes you may have to compromise. So you need to be able to define that in your process, because you might get a bunch of candidates. Some are really brilliant, but they may not fit so well into the team. Is that going to be okay for you? Maybe it is. In some cases, you might be happy with that. In other cases, you might say, well, look, I'm happy to sacrifice on some skills as long as I can get someone who's more of a team player. So whatever that is, you need to be able to communicate that. Don't seek a clone replacement. Instead, focus on the task and duties. A lot of people say, oh, look, this person's left, and in your mind's eye, you're looking to replace that person. You want to clone that person. Well, that's not going to happen. So it's better to focus on the tasks and duties. And when you are presented with candidates and when they interview with you, do not have that bias in your mind. Because a lot of the times people have this bias. It's like, I'm really looking, because we're all bias driven, and you're looking for these behavior traits in the candidates. You're not going to find it. Wipe that slate clean and focus on what is it that needs to be fixed, what needs to be done. And then focus on the questions and the resume of that individual around solving that problem, not that particular individual replacing the personality traits of the person that's left or you want to replicate, let's say, because you've grown. So this is a typical slide that I throw up sometimes just to give you an idea of the breakdown in communication that happens in any kind of process that involves many people. This is for a product development life cycle. The customer wanted this kind of tree, or they explained they wanted this tree, and they actually wanted something completely different at the end there. There's all these different types of impressions of what was required from the different people involved in the workflow. So this will also happen in a recruitment life cycle as well, depending on how many people are involved in the workflow. So be mindful of that and be as clear as possible, and keep going back and forth to recalibrate with whoever's involved in that workflow to make sure they completely understand what you're looking for. So reduce Chinese whisper syndrome. That's what I call the Chinese whisper syndrome. So highlight the key points of the spec to recruiters. So you've got to be very clear. Remember we talked about those 3 key points? You need to be clear to communicate those to recruiters. And you need to request 2 initial resumes from the recruiter to keep them on track. Why do you do that? Because you might have communicated them and they might have nodded and understood, but you're only going to know if they've understood it when they send you the CVs. Then you're going to look at the CVs and you're going to map them to what you were looking for, and you're going to say, actually, that's great. They've really understood me, or hold on a minute, this is not right. And then you need to go back to them in the feedback loop and make sure that they understand that this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong, and this is right. And through that process of elimination, you're going to be able to get that information across to them and get them to buy in to the problem. Give frank and honest feedback to your recruiters. Very, very important that you do that. If you don't do that, then it's going to become wishy-washy. Recruiters need to know if they're making a mistake, if they don't understand. So don't be vague in your feedback. Please be frank and honest at all times, and be available to them as well when they need your feedback, and respond in a timely fashion. This will speed up the process and will keep the process moving. Time kills deals, and that happens with every single situation. Candidates may lose interest. So you got your recruiter on one end, he's got this candidate, he's really, really good, and he's got their interest, but he can't get hold of you. Can't get hold of the internal people, and so the candidate loses interest. They may get poached by somebody else. You missed out on an opportunity. You need to move on these things quickly, particularly in a hot candidate market. A lot of people say, but there's loads of candidates out there and we'll just wait. No. That is a missed opportunity. I stress, do not miss out on the opportunity. Be available and give honest and frank feedback to your recruiters. Help them out. Request a candidate sourcing document from the recruiter. Again, this is for them to understand exactly what you want. If they've written it down, so you've given them a spec, you've had a conversation with them, and they've gone away and they thought they know something, but instead of just that, relying on that, get them to write it down in their own words and send it to you, and then you compare and contrast and see if there's any discrepancies. In that way, you are going to be assured that they've understood exactly what you want. Set a deadline with recruiters, or pull the plug and try another approach. What I mean by that is, look, if you're running a project, that's going to have a timeline on it. There may even be penalties externally. That means you're doing it for a client, and in your contract it says if you do not deliver within a timeline, then it's going to cost you. So you need to be able to get that resource on your books very, very quickly, or look at alternative options. And this is why you need to stress this sense of urgency to your recruiters and set a timeline. It could be, let's say, 6 weeks, 2 months, whatever it is. Give them enough time, obviously, to be able to do their job, because there's going to be a certain amount of optimum time that they need. But if it goes way, way beyond that, then you need to pull the plug and try a different approach. Don't ask HR to recruit for you. Instead, ask HR to identify good internal or external recruiter and work directly with them, keeping HR in the loop to increase efficiencies. What do I mean by that? Look, HR's job is not to recruit. Their job is to help you as a hiring manager to recruit the right people. So once they've vetted and identified a recruiter, internal or external, they'll just be kept in the loop, and then you guys have a point-to-point connection, work out, who is good and who's not good, interview whoever is really, really good, get them to that final stage of offer, then pull the HR person in and then close the deal. That's typically a very successful model that a lot of companies do use, and we work with a lot of HR people that are involved in that process. What goes wrong is when HR is really asked to kind of basically be a recruiter. I mean, that's not their job. So be mindful of that. That's what I say. Just be mindful of the fact that HR's job is not to recruit. That's not their core competency. Leverage their key skills and get them to vet the kind of suppliers out there that you can work with. How to hire your internal recruiter or your recruitment team. So let's talk about that. How do you hire your internal recruiters? What are the checkpoints when you're hiring an internal recruiter? Now, this could be a contract recruiter, or it could be a permanent internal recruiter. I suggest that you use these kinds of metrics or these methodologies to try to help you identify the right kind of person that's going to really add value in the recruitment process when you're looking to hire some talent into your company. Assess attention to detail. Use testing. Why attention to detail? Attention to detail is very important when you're looking at lots of resumes and you're not going to miss any details. That's what recruiters do. They're looking at hundreds and hundreds of resumes. They've got to have that attention to detail. They've got to be able to scan, be able to pick up the right things and not miss out on anything. So attention to detail is paramount in that role. Assess written and spoken skills. Well, that's a given. They've got to be able to communicate with you. They've got to be able to communicate with the candidate pool. So test for that. Hire those with some technical understanding of your domain or a passion to learn. What do I mean by that? Well, if they've got a technical background, because we do a lot of recruiting in the engineering profession primarily, so this is already applying primarily to engineering recruitment. So it might be different in other types of recruiting, but even in other types of recruitment, I think it applies. Hire those with an understanding of your domain. It could be non-technical, but they must have an understanding of your domain. If they haven't, it's going to be harder for them to do their job. So if they already have that understanding, or they have a passion to learn about your domain, that's the kind of person that you want to have in your company. Use psychology tests such as the Hexaco test and review conscientiousness score. Conscientiousness is really another word for sense of urgency, accountability, and resourcefulness. So once you've got all those things in the person, then they are more likely to be committed to getting a result for you. Ensure recruiters have a solid grasp of modern recruiting tools. What do I mean by that? Well, your typical ATSs, social media, all the different channels that candidates like to be communicated on, SMS, phone, whatever. All those different tools are important. If a recruiter doesn't have that experience, then it's going to be harder for them to do their job. Check for a sense of urgency. This is very, very important. They must have a sense of urgency because they are going to be running against the clock. And recruiting is not easy. They have to multitask as well. They have to be running multiple roles. So having that sense of urgency and having good time management skills is very important to be able to do that job properly. Hire those who have a passion to help the company and hire the best talent. What do I mean by that? They have to buy into the company they work for. They've got to love the company in some respects. Because if they can love the company, they're going to be able to communicate that passion, that love to the market and to the candidates and bring those people on board. Don't assume previous success is an indication of future success. Always test. What do I mean by that? So a recruiter that you're interviewing has a great resume, great references, but don't assume that they're going to do a great job in your company because your culture is going to be different. Your management style is going to be different. Everything's going to be different. So don't assume that. Test for all those things I've just mentioned. How to assess your recruitment agency suppliers. Check if they understand your business, technology, and culture. If they don't understand your business and your technology and your culture, do you really want to engage with them? Have they done their homework? Have they gone on your website? Have they gone and checked out LinkedIn to find out who the decision makers are, and the kind of people that you actually have in your organization? Have they looked at your competitors? Do they really understand your technology deeply? You want to work with those kind of vendors because those are the ones who are going to really give you that much additional value. Now, this question, the second question, which is ask what the attrition rate of recruiters, is an unusual question to ask. You think, well, it is, but you got to understand that in agency recruitment, the attrition rate is quite high. Recruiters don't hang around very long. 12 to 18 months is the normal average. So don't you prefer to work with the recruitment agencies that have recruiters that have been with them for a long time? Of course you do, because that way you can rest assured that you're going to get long-term service from that supplier. You don't want to have to go through that vetting process again and re-establish a new relationship. That's really a lot of work, and you don't want to do that. So you want to be able to go through that vetting process, pick somebody, build that relationship with the recruiter, and know that they're going to be around for a long time so that when requirements come up, you can go to them straight away and they're going to know you straight away. Ask what subject matter experts they have relating to your technical domain. What I mean by that is, look, in my example, I'm an engineer and I'm at the coalface. I'm actually recruiting every day. I'm talking to clients and candidates. And because I know the industry deeply, I can give more value to both sides. So vet your suppliers based on them having some sort of technical expertise within their organization, not just recruiters that are coming from a sales background, because you're not going to get the same level of value from them. So watch out for that and ask that question. You're not always going to get a yes. Typically, they're not going to have subject matter experts in the agency, but it's worth asking that question. But look around and see who's out there. Pick the ones that have industry-specific experts in their company. You're going to get a much better service if you do that. Ask how they source their candidates. The typical answer is going to be, well, we got a database, we put it up on job boards, etc., etc. Try to figure out if they go beyond a database and job sites, because job sites and databases don't work for very specialized roles. So ask those kind of questions. So ask the question, what is the size of their candidate pool and the type of candidates in their network? Well, why is that an important question to ask? Well, it's all about the reach in recruiting. If you're going to give your requirement to an agency and you're going to pay them a fee, don't you want to be assured that they have enough reach into the candidate pool to be able to be successful? If they don't, then they're not going to be successful at finding someone in a timely fashion. So it's very important to ask, what is the size of their network and the type of candidates in their network? What do I mean by that? Well, for instance, in our case, it's mostly engineers that we're placing, engineering managers. So it's important to ask that question. So you want to be able to get that answer, which is privy to your particular domain. If it's not, then you might want to seek out another supplier. What is the time to submit the first resume? It's important to identify this, because if you have no metric around this, then you don't know how long they're going to take. They normally have some idea depending on the type of role that they're trying to fill. If they fill those roles often enough, they'll have some idea of how long it's going to take, because they know who's out there, who's not out there. Typical answers are 1 week to 4 weeks. It could be a bit longer depending on your particular role. But to present the first candidate should be no more than a couple of weeks if they're good and they have a good candidate reach. So the next question to ask is, what communication channels do they use to communicate with candidates? And the typical communication channels are the phone, email, chat, SMS, etc., social media. So yeah, just ask what sort of channels they're using. Some agencies may not be using as many. Nowadays you have to use loads of different channels. Twitter, social media, LinkedIn, Facebook, whatever. There's many ways to communicate with candidates nowadays to reach them. So you want to be able to understand their methodology so that you can be assured that they are going to have the maximum opportunity to be able to reach the candidate pool in a timely fashion. Ask them if they do skills testing. We provide skill testing to our clients. It's important to know that it may be a additional paid service, but it's important for you to know if you have that option, because that will allow you to filter candidates before they even get to you. They can filter them for you and save you a bit of time. Are there any testimonials available? This is important as well to ask. Testimonials don't tell you everything, but they do give you a little bit of a glimpse as to what the user experience has been like with that particular agency from the market. This is also an interesting question to ask. How many jobs does one recruiter work on per month? The maximum is 5, but usually it's less than that. Now, a recruiter working on 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 jobs, there's a lot of work that a recruiter needs to do. They need to be looking at so many resumes, need to be making so many outbound calls to qualified candidates. There's a lot of work involved. So recruiters are really overloaded when they hit about 3 jobs a month. So if they're doing more than 3 jobs a month and they don't have any support and they're just doing everything themselves, they are going to be overloaded. So you don't want to be working with recruiters that are running 10 jobs at a time. They have to be running 3 or 4 jobs. That will give you a much better user experience, because they're not going to be just working on your roles, they're going to be working on other people's roles. So what's the level of commitment that they're going to give you as a client? So that's important to know that. How to ensure that you communicate with transparency and a sense of urgency. From the outset, stress the need to act quickly. What does that mean? Well, you need to be able to convey that sense of urgency to anybody that you're working with. That could be your internal people, it could be external vendors. You need to be able to communicate that sense of urgency and be available to these people as well. You need to make yourself available so they can actually get feedback from you. Keep all channels open. You need to be prompt in your responses, hiring managers, please, because a lot of the times you get busy as well, but you're going to miss out on an opportunity if you do not do that, because a lot of the times when you don't do that and you're not available, a candidate could have gone somewhere else and you could have missed that opportunity. Sometimes candidates fall off at the last minute because it's taken too long from the final interview to making a decision to an offer. It could be weeks. That's too long. It needs to be 2 or 3 days. If it's not more than 2 or 3 days, the candidate may lose interest, because it's really a confidence thing you're playing with here. It's a psychological game. It's almost like the candidate saying, well, you guys don't really care about me then, right? That's why you're taking so long to deliberate on a decision. If I was that good, you would have made that call straight away and you would have made me an offer. So candidates get a little bit of a bad taste in the mouth if you leave it too long. So move quickly in all of your processes. Move quickly to review resumes, give feedback, move quickly to interview, move quickly to give an offer if you like the candidate. Otherwise, just be honest and say, look, it's not going to work, and then move on. But be responsive. Be available to recruiters. I've already mentioned that. Be frank and honest. Be frank and honest at all times. I've mentioned this earlier, but I want to stress this more. Please do not be vague about your feedback. If something's working, great. If it's not working, then be honest and be frank. and give that feedback in all your responses. That's including to the candidate. Okay, this is an important one. Get everyone to buy into the problem so it becomes their problem. Use compelling stories. Look, the thing is, it's really hard to get across that sense of urgency to people that are not vested in the actual problem. This happens all the time. So you get your hiring manager, that's got that need, they need that person, they communicate it to a recruiter, internal, external, or an HR person. And that person's not vested in the problem. So how do you convey to them, get them on board, that it's really, really urgent. You need to be able to communicate that and be available, have regular meetups and catch-ups with people to keep the process moving. Otherwise, it's going to go slow, and you're going to end up really frustrated, and you're going to be missing out on candidates. Disclose everything to recruiters. This is kind of repeating what I said earlier. That's the scope of the work culture, the product roadmap, and the challenges. Very important to give them as much information so they can take that and communicate that to the candidate pool. Stay faithful to the initial problem when reviewing recruiter feedback and resumes. What I mean by that is sometimes you're not getting the kind of candidates you want, and you might be tempted to kind of go away from the initial requirement. Now, you can do that to a degree, but do not lose sight of the 3 key things that you thought about, the 3 most important things. Don't move away from them. Stay faithful to them and just keep going, and eventually you'll get there. So otherwise, what you're going to do is you're going to end up hiring someone that you're going to regret hiring, because you're running against the clock and you think, I just need somebody, and you hire someone and then they don't work out. How to use metrics which make sense and deliver results. So ask the recruiter to map out the candidate pool. What I mean by that is, ask the recruiter, how big is the pool? How many people do you think are going to be available for this kind of job out there? Do you have an idea? If they're a good recruiter and they've been in the market for a while, they're going to be able to advise you on that. You're going to have an idea of, if it's going to be an easy or difficult role and how long it's going to take. Based on the candidate mapping, set a time to fill the job. It can be 1 to 4 weeks or longer. Allow 2 additional weeks or 2 more weeks outside the 4 weeks, so 6 weeks in total. It really depends on the mapping. If you go to the recruiter and say, look, how easy is it going to be? Is it going to take a week, a month? How long is it going to take? Look, in some cases, I've gone to clients and said, look, it's a really, really difficult role. There's nobody out there at the moment. We're going to keep looking for you, but these people are just not available right now. So we'll just continue. So it's an open-ended kind of timeline. And so the client knows that. And so they might go to some other option and to try to recruit that person. But at least you've been honest and frank about it. But in other cases, the recruiter will say, it's going to take 2 weeks for the initial sort of short list, and then another 2 weeks to get you some more people, and then you can make a decision within the 4 weeks. It may sort of go out to 6 weeks. Typically, that's what happens in a typical recruitment life cycle. That's a normal timeline. But just be aware of that. I've already mentioned this before. Be available to recruiters and be prompt in your response. It's important that you get back to recruiters in a timely fashion. Expect the first candidate submission no later than 1 week. So set some sort of a metric, with your recruiter. Expect no more than 5 solid candidates over the recruitment life cycle. Now, what I mean by solid, it means they are 80% matched to your job requirement. So you're not going to find more than that. You don't want to be interviewing more than 5 people for one job. Typically, it'll be around 3 people, and you pick one and you hire them. Expect timely feedback from your recruiter. This is determined by you. So you need to set this with your recruiter. Expect to get back to your recruiter within 24 hours, and expect your recruiter to respond in 24 hours. So these are some of the metrics that you can use in your recruitment workflow. How to ensure that you respect the time and effort of job seekers. I urge you to always give feedback to job seekers. I know a lot of people say, oh no, we got busy and we get so many applicants. You need to really find the time to get back to job seekers. It's good for your company brand, really, to be honest. Because if you do that, then people are going to respect your company more. They're going to feel, that they've gone to all this trouble and they've just been left high and dry. Now, this happens even once they've been interviewed, and that's a really sad thing. So you need to give feedback, even if it's email saying, look, sorry, we're not successful. A lot of companies are doing this, obviously, and recruiters do get busy. I know that. I'm a recruiter myself, but please try to be diligent about this. Try to make that additional effort to try to get back to job seekers. Act quickly to set up interviews for suitable candidates. What I mean by that is don't delay too long. If you found somebody and they look good on paper and you're happy to sort of bring them in, make a call on it quickly, or sooner rather than later, and bring them in for a chat and see if they're a suitable candidate for that particular job. Sell yourself and your company. Remember, it's a two-way street. It's literally a two-way street. Good candidates, the high flyers, they have many options. So if you want them on board, you need to be able to convince them to join your company. You have to be able to not convince them so much, but convey to them that you are going to be adding value to their career development as much as they are going to be adding value to your company by doing the kind of work that you want them to do. It's always a two-way street. If required, conduct multiple interviews quickly. So sometimes companies conduct more than one interview. I suggest you do that in quick successions rather than delaying it too long. Again, you might lose the interest of the candidate if you delay it for too long. Try to schedule these interviews quickly, one after the other, to keep the ball rolling. Make job offers quickly after interviews, no later than 1 week. Because again, remember, these candidates may have opportunities. If you leave it too long, it's going to create two problems. One is the candidate may lose interest in you because they're waiting and they haven't heard anything and they're thinking, well, where's this going? And secondly, they might start looking at other options. So you may even end up losing them. So it's important, if you like them, move quickly on it. Follow up with candidates offered within 3 days. So if you've offered somebody, even directly or through an agency, contact these candidates, ask them if everything's okay, if they've looked at the terms of the offer, if everything's all good, if they have any questions you can answer, or get your agency to do that. Because if you don't do that, there might be something that's wrong. Because normally when an offer is submitted, the candidate, if they're really keen on the job, will respond within a couple of days at the most. They've probably had time to deliberate. If they have any questions, they will get back to you within a couple of days. If it goes more than 4 or 5 days, they're either considering multiple offers or they've lost interest. And so you need to nip that in the bud. Close the candidate offered and resolve any issues quickly. So we mentioned that earlier. Get on to them, see if they have any questions and answer those questions. Now, what happens if they are deliberating too long? There's probably something wrong. So cut your losses if the candidate is taking too long. If the candidate is taking more than a week, there's probably something else that's wrong. So you need to get down to the bottom of it and figure out if they're still keen or if they're not. Give them a little bit more time if they're taking a bit longer than a week, but no more than a fixed time span. If they don't respond within that period of time, just withdraw the offer. How to use social media to communicate your brand to candidates. So how do you use social media? There's many ways to communicate your brand. Now, a lot of people are doing this already, so this is something which is old hat. I'm just going to repeat it here. Showcase your products on YouTube. So a lot of people are now making YouTube videos, and we even have a YouTube channel ourselves, and I make a few geeky videos from time to time. And I'm doing some podcasts with some people, and I put those up. So anything that showcases your company, go to the trouble of making them, and put them up there. Make regular posts on social media. So companies have their company pages on LinkedIn, maybe have it on Facebook or whatever. Do some regular posts so that people know what's going on in your company. Film inside your company to show transparency. What I mean by that is, go in with a camera, look at what people are doing. It gives people a sense of who you are. They get to know you, get to know your company, and they feel that they already know you before they even come for the interview. Interview your staff, get to, do some podcasts, interview your staff on your products and services, their backgrounds, etc. But make sure that it's targeted, that content's targeted for your audience. Don't just make it vague. Try to be more targeted in that content. So that's my advice on that. So let's look at what the candidate experience is like. Learn how candidates see the recruitment process and how best to communicate with them. So what are some of the candidate concerns? They don't want you to send them jobs which are not matched to their experience. Now, this applies for internal recruiters as well as external recruiters. Don't approach candidates that are not a fit for the job. Don't spam them with jobs that are not suitable. So they don't really like that because it's a waste of their time. Promise less and deliver more. What I mean by that is, again, recruiters tend to promise things they can't deliver on. Be honest, under-promise and over-deliver. Understand their technical skills and experience deeply. What I mean by that is when you're talking to them, make sure you read their CV. Make sure you got on their LinkedIn profile. Make sure you know what kind of work they've done. And then talk around that when you're talking to them, because that will instill a sense of confidence in them that you know what they're about from their skills and experience. Now, don't ghost them either. Now, a lot of recruiters will ghost their candidates if they got nothing for them. Like they might go for an interview, the interview wasn't successful, and they'll just leave them hanging. Don't do that. That's not good. Follow up with them, give them some sort of feedback, and if they call you, make sure you return their calls. Be frank and honest at all times. I keep mentioning this over and over again, but it's important that you give frank and honest advice. And sometimes that advice may not be something that people want to hear, but at least you're being honest and frank about it. Treat them with integrity. What I mean with that is candidates are people. One day they're going to be in high positions. So, what goes around comes around. Treat them with integrity and respect them. How to use technical testing is one filter. Testing is important, but you must use it with caution. Use skills testing, coding tests, but be aware. Now, We do a lot of code testing for our clients, but we always emphasize that the code test is only going to tell you so much. Yes, it's a filter, and some candidates actually do not like taking these tests because they think it's a bit of an insult on their experience, but it is an important filter, and I do recommend you do it. So do skills testing, but make sure that you combine that with other types of testing. And if people are on the borderline, bring them in for an interview and make sure you're not missing out. Personality tests as well, which are important as well, but most of these are for leadership roles, in the role of team lead or CTO or CEO. These are normally used in those kinds of roles, but you can also use psychometric testing for other types of roles, engineering roles even. So there's another kind of test that clients do give, and we have a couple of clients that do this. So what they do is they actually supply a candidate once they've interviewed them, unless they go to the first interview and they've got through the first interview. On the second interview, instead of interviewing them, they would give them a physical evaluation board, like an STM32 board, and they'll get them to write some real code for that board. They'll give them a task and they'll get them to write the code. And then they'll look at that code and figure out if they're actually understood a real live situation, a real practical situation. So that's another test that you could give as well. So hopefully that's been useful. Hope you guys have found some value from that to help you with your recruitment workflow. And remember, look, recruiting is not something that is an easy task. Trying to attract people, there's many moving parts. So have some compassion for your internal and external recruiters. Make sure you vet them properly. Make sure you involve the right people in the workflow, and make sure you communicate what you want, but be clear on what you want. So you've got to be absolutely clear on what you want first, communicate that clearly, have that feedback loop in that process, and be available to your suppliers and the people in the actual workflow. If you do all those things, you're going to get a better successful outcome. You can contact me at lance@runtimerec.com, or you can connect with me on LinkedIn.